History of climate engineering. Climate engineering attempts have been traced back as far as 1841 to meteorologist James Pollard Espy's proposal to create rains by burning the Appalachian forests. It now becomes necessary to assign agencies capable of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at a rate sufficiently above the normal rate of supply at certain times to produce glaciation, and on the other hand, capable of restoring it to the atmosphere at certain other times in sufficient amounts to produce mild climates. Dane Wigington, a solar energy expert and former employee of Bechtel Power Corp., now runs geoengineeringwatch.org, a website set up to expose the harmful conspiracy which has had more than 22.3 million visitors. He investigated why solar panels at his home lost power as aircraft contrails formed in the sky. According to Mr. Wigington, the contrails, or chemtrails, we see forming behind aircraft most days are carrying out geoengineering. An introduction to the subject on his website states, "It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It's happening right above you." He said a system called Solar Radiation Management, SRM, was being used whereby scientists had tried to mimic the effects of a major volcanic eruption on temperature. Just one of the chemicals being sprayed profusely in chemtrails, aluminum, causes all sorts of health problems. The chemical attacks the nervous system, primarily, and causes everything from disturbed sleep, nervousness, emotional instability, memory loss, headaches, and impaired intellect. Whether this is an intentional or accidental side effect of chemtrails spraying remains to be uncovered. Soil and water samples are being tested at the top of Shasta, California, and in Siskiyou County, for example, and the aluminum levels are high enough to kill a moose. The levels are off the charts, with the highest reading so far at 4,610 times the maximum contaminate level for drinking water in the sunny state. The recent snow sample taken from Ski Bowl on Shasta showed 61,000 UG/L. 61 times the maximum contaminant level for aluminum in drinking water. Read more. http://naturalsociety.com/aluminum barium strontium chemtrails. Only as the plane reaches cruising velocity does the heat and atmospheric pressure cause a chemical reaction that synthesizes the top-secret carbon-trapping molecule. This process is imperfect, and many of the byproducts are incredibly dangerous even in trace quantities. The most dangerous thing is that although chemtrails are keeping the climate of the US reasonably stable, citizens are bombarded every day with an invisible rain of carbon-laden molecules, and the effect on health is totally unknown. Contrails are chemtrails. Case Orange rejects use of the term chemtrails because it is associated with amateur conspiracy theorists. The only credible document it could find that uses it is the Space Preservation Act of 2001 introduced by U.S. Representative Dennis Kucinich. D.O. H.R. 2977 sought to ban the use of exotic weapon systems that would damage climate, weather, tectonic and biological systems. Chemtrails are specifically listed, though later removed. No version of the bill ever became law. Instead, the writers prefer the term persistent contrails to describe the phenomenon, since all contrails are chemtrails. Persistent contrails distinguishes those that contain weather-altering additives from those that represent normal aircraft exhaust that dissipates after a few seconds or minutes. Case Orange also reveals a 1991 patent held by Hughes Aircraft Company that contains 18 claims to reduce global warming through stratospheric seeding with aluminum oxide, thorium oxide and refractory well-spot material. The report notes that the proposed scenario by the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in 2001 is identical to the claims in Hughes Aircraft's 1991 patent. Hughes was acquired by Raytheon, a private defense contractor, in 1997. The same company that acquired E-Systems and the HARP contract.
Jasper Kirby is a particle physicist, currently engaged with cloud physics research at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. In an article published in the journal Nature, Kirby reports that cosmic rays, quote, seem to enhance the production of nanometer-sized particles from the gaseous atmosphere by more than a factor of 10, unquote. He added, however, that the particles in question are far too small to serve as cloud condensation nuclei. This important excerpt from Dr. Kirby's 2009 presentation makes it clear that IPCC climate scientists are fully aware that jet aircraft are dumping aerosols into the atmosphere with the effect of deliberate climate warming.
There's plenty of evidence that large regions of the climate are lacking sufficient aerosol to form clouds. Contrails are a well-known example of that. These are not smoke trails, these are clouds which are seeded by jets dumping aerosols into the upper atmosphere. These are clouds which are seeded by jets dumping aerosols into the upper atmosphere.
But if there was a conspiracy to use jet-produced clouds to cool the atmosphere, would it work? No.
The contrails that are spreading that you can identify as contrails, those would tend to warm the atmosphere. Everything that we know about would say that. The contrails that are spreading that you can identify as contrails, those would tend to warm the atmosphere. Everything that we know about would say that.
Dr. Pinner's statement is not taken lightly by climate scientists. Her comments echo the 1999 climate change publication titled IPCC Special Report on Aviation and the Global Atmosphere. On page 17, the quote, contrails tend to warm the Earth's surface, similar to thin, high clouds, unquote. So, jet aircraft are dumping chemical aerosols high in the atmosphere to create artificial contrails that spread into thin, high, artificial clouds that your TV meteorologist has been told to misrepresent by telling the public they're only ice crystals. Dr. Kirby's almost too casual comment confirming that jet aircraft are dumping aerosols into the atmosphere reveals that this covert geoengineering and chemtrail operation is well known by government agencies like NASA, NOAA, and the FAA. The IPCC climate scientists being paid to churn out climate change propaganda, and geoengineers like David Keith, Ken Caldera, and their boss, Bill Gates. The public needs to demonstrate their outrage at this massive conspiracy of government secrecy that allows these toxins.
Some observers believe experimental additives are turning these long lines of exhaust into chemical contrails. They call them chemtrails. They say it's all part of secret atmospheric tests, and humans are the unknowing guinea pigs.
There's no evidence for supporting that assertion.
Are some contrails more than normal fuel emissions and frozen water vapor? We call on witnesses from both sides. And experts conduct several experiments, searching for ominous substances and a final verdict as we examine the best evidence. Contrails have existed for as long as aircraft have flown. They normally occur when hot engine exhaust meets humid and frigid air at high altitudes.
So a jet plane flies through this cold atmosphere and produces a hot exhaust that is mostly composed of carbon dioxide and water vapor.
This exhaust condenses into visible ice crystals. They form white streaks which can linger for minutes or hours. Aviation experts claim with increased air travel we're seeing more contrails. There's nothing more to it. But some people believe that the same aircraft can release experimental chemical additives in the air as chemical contrails or chemtrails. In this way, government agencies can either manipulate the weather or counteract global warming. But some people claim chemtrails are harming an unsuspecting public. Eyewitnesses and researchers who believe in chemtrails say that Jet contrails don't vanish within minutes as they once did. They now linger and spread, sometimes for hours, forming strange, suspicious patterns. Rosalind Peterson is one of those believers.
It's not normal for us. It's a grand experiment.
Peterson lives in Northern California near San Francisco. At one time, she worked for the State Department of Agriculture. Part of her job involved being aware of environmental issues.
I first started noticing unusual contrails in 2002 when it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine. He took me outside of his office and we began to look at these persistent jet contrails.
Peterson thought she saw a connection between aircraft activity and reports of chemically contaminated water in communities throughout California.
There were unusual high spikes in chemicals and heavy metals. Barium, aluminum, manganese, magnesium, zinc. And I suspect that we're getting the pollution from something in the atmosphere that's being released.
Peterson became so alarmed about the chemical contrails that she formed an organization called California Skywatch, a group dedicated to clean air.
I started documenting what I was seeing. I took pictures on my breaks. I took pictures at lunch hour. I started to really get angry because our once deep blue skies were no longer deep blue. They would turn into a white haze, and they would turn into these man-made clouds blocking the sunlight.
Peterson discovered that she wasn't alone in her concerns. Hundreds of websites revealed that persistent airplane contrails had become a worldwide problem.
I started then to research internet sites and government agencies, the EPA, NOAA, NASA, the United States Air Force. I learned that there was a lot of...
Next speaker is Dr. Rosalind Peterson. She's the California president and co-founder of the Agriculture Defense Coalition, formed in 2006 to protect agricultural crop production from uncontrolled experimental weather modification programs. A very interesting topic, you know, for a non-specialized person like myself. But also very interesting in her CV that we have with you is also her extensive efforts to protect drinking water supplies from toxic chemical contamination in Martinez, California. That's a very interesting topic, of course, and I was actually wondering myself whether you can tackle whether the same experiments that you're holding in California could be extended to other world countries, particularly poor and developed countries like where we come from. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. It is a pleasure to be here to speak with all of you today. One of the things that I would like to say is that we are in a global drumbeat right at the moment talking about climate change and global warming. One of the things that is affected by climate change is agriculture. But some of what we are seeing is man-made, but man-made in a different way than you may guess. Weather modification programs, experimental ones done by private companies, done by the United States government, done by states across the United States are underway. There's more than 50 of them in operation across the United States. So that what happens is that we are putting chemicals, ground-based chemicals that are shot into the air, or chemicals coming from airplanes that change and modify our weather. So one of the things that I'm concerned about and that we need to address in the future is how these programs are impacting microclimates needed for our crops to survive and needed for pollination. This is all public record, are available at any time with oversight, agricultural oversight or public oversight. These programs impact experimental and other types of weather modification programs. The other issue is that a lot of times we're talking about mitigation for climate change. It's rather an undefined term at this period of time. And so what happens is that many times we're talking about artificially putting chemicals like sulfur or particulates into the atmosphere in what they call geoengineering schemes to reduce and help the planet, supposedly, but help the planet to not go through such a tremendous global climate change and to mitigate global warming. However, the incidence of putting chemicals into our atmosphere is going to change and impact agricultural crop production. And if you take and you put up into our skies chemicals to reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the earth, you are going to begin to reduce crop production. Studies at the University of Illinois on corn crop production show reductions. Without the process of photosynthesis, whereby plants from direct sunlight gain the energy to grow, to produce crops, we are going to find ourselves, if we mitigate in that direction, impacting the crop production not only here in the United States, but worldwide. One of the things that is impacting crop production right now in the United States and reducing photosynthesis and also impacting the ability of solar power panels to generate the type of power that they should is persistent jet contrails. NASA talks about persistent jet contrails as exacerbating global warming because they trap warmth in the atmosphere when they produce cirrus and man-made clouds. NASA also talks about that that these aircraft leaving persistent contrails are changing our climate. And when they change our climate to the degree that one jet can leave a persistent jet contrail, which will spread across our skies, from what this picture up here on my left on the screen looks like, which is a trail left by a jet, that trail can expand to 4,000 kilometers and last for 20 hours. This was unheard of in the early 60s and the 70s, and it wasn't until the late 1980s that there was a change and we started to have persistent jet contrails that persist. NASA studies show that part of our global warming problem could be attributed to these types of contrails and the jets that leave them. So one of the issues as we go through is, how do you like your skies, natural or man-made? And right now we are making man-made clouds, and this is trapping warmth in our atmosphere. The climate change that is produced by these jets, not all jets, mostly some non-commercial, but what happens to our skies is that we start to see the changes. The man-made clouds do trap the warmth, and they increase the humidity. This allows for pests to proliferate, diseases, molds, mildews, funguses, and viruses. This is a man-made cloud, ladies and gentlemen, and these pictures I took myself over Northern California, and this is a burst. This is where a jet left a huge plume, and then this turned in at the end of it to a burst. And this is not normal, never seen before in our county historically, and I was born and raised there. This is another picture showing the jet trail just before the burst. This is our skies, and I want you to know that what you're seeing now, a lot of times many scientists know, especially at NASA and in other areas, that the skies that we're seeing are not normal cloud formations. These are man-made. And what happens as we reduce the amount of sunlight in a form of global dimming, we reduce the solar power with these type of clouds, and we reduce photosynthesis, which is going to impact agriculture. The pictures look odd. The formations don't look like normal clouds that people have seen before historically. This is another type of man-made cloud, and what we have done and what you're seeing here is we have the photographs from the times that the jet leaves the first trail as a thin, spindly trail to where they form into these different types of cloud formations. All of you can start looking up and seeing this. What happens is that there are experiments, and there's a color, you can see some color in this photograph. And part of what we're doing also is we're sending up canisters. The United States government, NASA, the U.S. Air Force, is sending up canisters into the atmosphere filled with chemicals to modify and experiment with our ionosphere.